These are the headlines we're following at this hour. Search and rescue operations are taking place in the flooded underpass in the central town of Osong, where 13 have been confirmed dead. More deaths from the monsoon have been reported nationwide, with Chungcheongbuk-do Province seeing the most fatalities. President Yoon declares a special disaster zone for rain-hit regions, guaranteeing the central government's assistance. That after President returned home from his surprise visit to Ukraine, where he pledged more non-lethal military supplies. Good afternoon. The entire nation is reeling from the aftermath of torrential downpours. Among the hardest hit areas is the central city of Cheongju, where search and rescue operations have continued for days at an underpass that was completely submerged in a flash flood. Our Song Yujin is on site to bring the latest. Yujin, what do we know so far?
Well, hello, Kyungwon. I'm currently in Osong of Cheongju in South Korea's Chungcheongbuk-do Province. We're about a 2-hour drive from capital Seoul. And what you see behind me is the flooded underpass tunnel, which took away the lives of 13 people and another 9 people were injured. Now, those figures are according to the latest on-site briefing that was provided by search and rescue operation officials on site. Now, to give you a brief overview of the entire accident, this all started on Saturday morning when the 685-meter-long tunnel was completely submerged in floodwater from a nearby river after the water rushed into the tunnel. Now, search and rescue efforts have been ongoing since then, with firefighters and soldiers pumping water out of the underpass so they can access it. Now, rescue teams were finally able to enter the tunnel late last night, a little bit after 10 p.m., but they're still having difficulty making their way inside due to the mud and also toxic gases that have accumulated inside the tunnel. So currently, we don't exactly know how many people were initially trapped inside the tunnel, but rescue workers here say 12 vehicles are still inside after they pulled out 4, including a bus. They're saying it's very likely that the death toll could rise.
I see, but the entire nation was affected by the severe weather conditions. What do we know about other regions? Tell us more.
Yes, well, latest data from the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures headquarters show that as of 11 a.m. today, the death toll stood at 40, while 9 people still remain missing. And I want to point out that this is the highest number of deaths and people missing in 12 years. And we have to note that the monsoon season in this country is not over yet. And also, 34 people have been injured and over 15,000 people have evacuated from their homes for safety. And the southern regions of the country were especially hit hard over the weekend. So to look at the death toll, 19 deaths were recorded in the mountainous Gyeongbuk-do Province, mostly caused by landslides, another 16 in Chungcheongbuk-do Province, where I'm right now, and 4 and 1 in Chungcheongnam-do Province and neighboring Sejong City. But I also want to say that we're bracing for more rain this week as well. That's because the Korea Meteorological Administration forecasts around 100 to 200 millimeters of rain will fall on Chungcheongdo, Gyeongsang-do, Jeollado provinces and Jeju Island into Tuesday. Heavy rain alerts have already been issued for these areas. So to prevent further damage, the Interior Ministry and local governments are really warning people to stay away, stay distant from flood and landslide-prone areas and frequently check for weather updates. That's all I have for now, but I'll be back with more updates in our later newscast. Back to you, Kyungwon.
All right, our Song Yujin for us. Thank you. Now, President Yoon has declared a special disaster zone for rain-hit regions, guaranteeing the central government's assistance. The president has also called for a radical change in the nation's future disaster management. Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
As soon as he returned home from his week-long overseas trip, President Yoon chaired a Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures headquarters meeting on Monday and called for regions hit especially hard by the monsoon rain to be classed as special disaster zones.
복구 작업과 재난 피해에 대한 지원 역시 신속하게 이루어져야 하고 특별 재난 지역 선포 등 정책 수단을 모두 동원하여 후속 조치를 신속하게 추진해 주기 바랍니다.
If a region is designated as a special disaster zone, the central government guarantees financial support for its recovery efforts. Yoon, meanwhile, said all possible resources have to be mobilized, including the military and the police. He also showed his condolences to the families of the victims from the past week's rain. This is second monsoon season since he took office, and he has already experienced serious rain-related incidents last year. As the president, he showed his discontent for the disaster response, saying areas exposed to such dangers were not managed well before the rainfall.
위험 지역에 대한 진입 통제와 또 위험 지역으로부터의 선제적 대피를 작년부터 거듭 강조하고 있습니다마는 현장에서 재난 대응의 기본 원칙이 지켜지지 않는다면 국민의 안전을 확보하기 어렵습니다.
As the nation is expecting more heavy rain in the next few days, Yoon called for the authorities to take on the situation with extraordinary alertness. He also said, with climate change affecting the nation's weather, authorities have to completely reset their mindsets about the monsoon season.
앞으로 이런 기상 이변은 늘 일상화되는 것이기 때문에 이러한 기후 변화의 상황을 이제 우리가 늘상 있는 것으로 알고 대처를 해야지 이거를 이상 현상이니까 어쩔 수 없다는 식의 인식은 완전히 뜯어 고쳐야 됩니다.
This was his first time taking charge of the disaster response meeting in person, as he had previously been communicating with the team virtually from Europe. The Prime Minister and relevant ministers were also at the meeting in person, with the nation's top police officer, fire chief, and local government chiefs connecting virtually. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The daily torrential rain has also brought the attention of the international media to South Korea, reports blaming climate change for being behind the severe weather that's now gripping East Asia. Lee Seung-jae has more.
Despite preparations made and warnings given ahead of the monsoon rains that have slammed parts of South Korea, this year's rainy season has been one of the deadliest in recent years, claiming dozens of lives and leaving many missing. And a number of foreign media outlets have covered the deadly torrential rain, as well as the devastating damage, including the New York Times, which reported on the flooding of a 685-meter-long underpass in Osong, Chungcheongbuk-do Province, where over a dozen people were trapped by flash flooding. Bloomberg News said that South Korea suffers from storms and heavy rain every summer, with casualties and property damage reported due to natural disasters every year. Reuters also reported on the tragedy in Osong and said the disaster occurred despite a government pledge to strengthen preparations for heavy rains after Seoul was severely damaged by the heaviest rain in 115 years last year. It also cited a local who frequently uses the route, who said that the government should have blocked access to the underpass as the flooding was expected. However, according to Al Jazeera, South Korea is regularly hit by flooding during the summer monsoon period, but it's typically well prepared and the death toll is usually relatively low. Nevertheless, the foreign media outlets also cited a number of climate experts who say extreme rain in South Korea in recent years is a result of climate change. This includes a CNN broadcast, which said that scientists have warned that heavy rain damage is increasing throughout East Asia as the possibility of extreme weather changes increases due to the climate crisis. The world continues to keep a close eye on the situation in South Korea, as it could easily be a similar situation in other parts of the world, with volatile and extreme weather patterns being reported globally. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Over the weekend, President Yoon Suk-yeol wrapped up his trip to Europe, which included a surprise visit to Ukraine. There he pledged more non-lethal military assistance. Our top office correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
South Korea has promised more non-lethal military supplies to Ukraine and over $200 million in humanitarian aid and loans to rebuild the war-torn country. Veering off his official trip to Poland, President Yoon Suk-yeol made a sudden state visit to Ukraine, travelling a total of 27 hours through road and rail, becoming the first South Korean leader to visit a nation at war.
우크라이나의 연대와 희망의 메시지를 전하기 위해 여기에 왔습니다. 저는 저와 우리 국민은 우크라이나가 자유를 되찾을 때까지, 국권을 회복할 때까지 여러분들과 함께 할 것입니다.
Following his talks with Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky, Yoon declared a new aid package for Ukraine, dubbed the Ukraine Peace and Solidarity Initiative, comprising nearly 9 agreements on expanding Seoul's military, humanitarian and reconstruction assistance. According to Principal Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Tae-ho, Yoon first declared support for Zelensky's 10-point peace formula and efforts to hold a peace conference. While Seoul did not announce any lethal weapon support, it pledged to expand supplies of critical equipment for Ukrainian forces and support the recovery and counseling for children traumatized and violated by the ongoing war.
Specifically, we can happily conclude that an agreement on the transfer of specialized vehicles and technical equipment, including for demining, is already being implemented. This helps us preserve human lives. Thank you, Mr. President, for new initiatives on financial, technical and humanitarian aid to Ukraine.
In terms of humanitarian aid, Seoul plans to increase its annual contribution this year by 30% on year to $150 million. Yoon also noted that around $100 million has been allocated for long-term low-interest loans in a bilateral MOU on funding Ukraine's various reconstruction projects. Yoon and Zelensky further agreed to cooperate on nurturing Ukraine's future generation, supporting online and offline education by providing laptops and rebuilding facilities, as well as creating a scholarship for Ukrainian students in South Korea. Prior to the summit, Yoon visited Bucha, a city whose people suffered brutal war crimes and massacre by Russian forces. He also toured Irpin, where fierce fighting led to nearly 70% of the city being destroyed. Amid concerns that Korea's broadening support for Kyiv may raise eyebrows in Moscow, Seoul says it will continue to pursue stable relations with Russia. Still, Yoon made it clear that Koreans stand in solidarity for the freedom, peace and recovery of Ukraine.
Drawing parallels with South Korea's own rise from the ashes of war through the socio-economic miracle on the Han River, Yoon said he is confident that Ukraine is on the same trajectory of post-war recovery in a miracle on the Dnipro River. Osong, Arirang News, Warsaw.
President Yoon's visit to Kyiv symbolizes more than just providing support and cooperation for the war-torn nation. It is also expected to result in strengthened security ties with the U.S. and Japan. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji explains.
While pledging to expand support, President Yoon highlighted the importance of freedom and peace in Ukraine in a show of solidarity.
대한민국은 우크라이나의 자유와 평화, 번영을 가꾸는 동반자가 될 것이며 나아가 우크라이나와 함께 세계의 자유, 평화, 번영에 함께 기여하는 믿음직한 파트너가 될 것입니다. 그 희망찬 미래를 향해 저와 젤렌스키 대통령은 더욱 긴밀히 소통하고 협력해 나아갈 것입니다.
Pundits say Yoon's visit could be part of South Korea's efforts to strengthen security cooperation with the U.S. and Japan, as all three leaders have now visited Ukraine. In February, U.S. President Joe Biden made a surprise visit to Kyiv and promised to provide $500 million in additional military aid. Then in March, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida also visited Ukraine and vowed to supply $30 million worth of non-lethal equipment. As South Korea works to strengthen partnerships with the U.S. and Japan, President Yoon's visit to Ukraine is expected to have brought the countries closer together ahead of their trilateral summit scheduled for next month in Washington. In fact, after wrapping up President Yoon's trip to the war-torn nation, the country's Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Tae-ho said this came as South Korea works to expand cooperation with other countries.
Above all, President Yoon's visit took place as the Yoon administration's value diplomacy and responsible diplomacy have expanded beyond Asia, as the country works to closely cooperate with Europe and other parts of the world.
He added the issues on Ukraine could be discussed at summits, but by actually being on site, it was easier to tell what kind of cooperation was truly needed. He also explained that President Yoon's visit came at Zelensky's invitation, and that Yoon made the final decision after careful considerations over security and safety. Seoul's presidential office reportedly said it understood the invitation as part of Ukraine's expectations for South Korea, in terms of its role in the ongoing war, which is the most urgent issue within the international community. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
The global electric vehicle boom has boosted South Korea's auto exports to new heights in the first half of this year. Our Humanitarian has the details.
South Korea's auto industry recorded an exports boom for the first half of the year, hitting an all-time high on the back of the rising popularity of eco-friendly vehicles. Data from the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Monday showed that the total value of auto exports amounted to $35.7 billion for the January to June period this year. This is the highest related figure ever recorded, beating the previous record of $25.2 billion set in 2014. And combined with the value of outbound auto parts, the total surpassed $47 billion. Meaning that the country is well on track to meet its $80 billion goal for the end of this year. The ministry attributed this to the rising popularity of so-called eco-friendly vehicles such as electric and hybrid cars, which saw more than a 70% rise in total export value compared to the same period last year. 385,000 of these cars were sold, meaning that around a quarter of all outbound cars were in the eco-friendly category. June alone saw the second highest export value of green cars in history and marked the fifth consecutive month in which sales exceeded the $2 billion mark. The popularity of electric vehicles was seen most prominently in the United States and in Europe, with the Hyundai Motors Ioniq 5 and 6 electric vehicles selling out at record rates. Last week, the firm reported that sales in the UK had reached the highest level since 2018. Car production was also restored to 2019's pre-COVID-19 capacity, along with a supply of chips and various parts. More than 2 million units were produced during the first half of the year. Meanwhile, auto sales within South Korea were up by around 10% compared to the same period last year. 894,000 cars were sold, with the vast majority of those being domestically produced cars. South Korea has seen a rising preference for cars from domestic firms over foreign imports, with domestic car sales rising by over 8% on year, while foreign car sales fell by over 3%. Eco-friendly cars accounted for just under a third of total sales, and hybrid cars were the most popular, selling over 177,000 units and making up nearly 67% of total eco-friendly car sales. 문혜련, Arirang News.
South Korea's imports of Japanese seafood fell again last month. According to Korea Customs Service on Monday, around $10 million seafood was imported from Japan in June, down by 21.7% from the previous year. The volume of the imports also dropped by 34.7% on year. This is the third consecutive month that both the value and volume of the imports have fallen. On the other hand, South Korea's imports of Japanese beer in June soared to the highest since South Korea started boycotting Japanese products amid a trade dispute in 2019. Japanese beer took up about 27% of the total beer imports in June, which is more than any other country. Imagine you're facing an urgent situation in a foreign country, but you have difficulties communicating due to language. Well, here in South Korea, that's not so much of a problem, thanks to a special interpretation service by the police agency. Our Choi Soo-hyung reports.
No more need to hesitate when you are in an emergency situation in South Korea. The Korean National Police Agency started its 112 emergency call interpretation service on July 3rd. The service aims at assisting any foreign visitors or residents who lack the ability to speak Korean with their emergency calls to 112. Currently, the service is provided by 4 interpreters, 2 each for English and Chinese.
喂，你好，这里是112报警中心中文翻译服务。
Rather than using other interpretation services, people call 112 when they are in urgent and desperate situations. We feel a great sense of fulfillment that we are able to assist by translating during this time.
In April of last year, there was feedback that foreign visitors and immigrants to Korea missed out and immediately reporting a crime committed against them during the crucial golden time 1 hour after the incident due to the language barrier. After more than a year of preparation, the service has been launched to address this issue, coinciding with the rapid growth of foreign tourists following the downgrading of the COVID-19 pandemic to an endemic.
Two French women, they got lost their way down from the top of Samak Mountain, which is located in Chungcheon. So we try to communicate every 30 minutes to 40 minutes because we wanted to make sure if they're safe in there and if they have any changes of their location. So finally we rescue them.
The previous method, which involved recording foreigners' reports, outsourcing the translation to private institutions, and then relaying the information to the police station, resulted in an average response time of over 6 minutes. However, since the simultaneous interpretation is in a three-way system involving the reporting individual, police officers, and the interpreter, the average response time has been reduced to 2 minutes and 21 seconds. Foreigners also have high expectations of receiving significant assistance in the case of emergencies.
In my case, I have been living in Korea for 13 years, so I can speak Korean to some extent. However, in urgent situations, it would be reassuring to have a service someday that I can immediately use in my native language.
Police officers urge foreign visitors to Korea to just call 112 if they become victims of crime. The police agency is planning to increase the number of supported languages as the demand for interpretation services continues to grow. Chungcheong, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. We begin with Russian President Vladimir Putin threatening to use cluster bombs in Ukraine. Speaking on Sunday, he said that the country has a sufficient stockpile of the munitions and that they would be used if cluster munitions are deployed against Russian forces in Ukraine. The comment comes after Ukraine said on Thursday that it had received cluster bombs from the United States. The US says the cluster bombs are meant to address Ukraine's shortage of shells as it continues its counter-offensive. Cluster bombs release large numbers of explosive bomblets designed to kill personnel and destroy vehicles over a wide area. But the weapon's use is controversial, as it can indiscriminately affect civilians, and some bomblets can explode years later, similar to landmines. The use or stockpile of the weapon is banned in over 100 countries. Meanwhile, Ukraine and Poland reported over the weekend that fighters from the mercenary Wagner Group have arrived in Belarus from Russia. Lionel Messi officially joined Major League Soccer's Inter Miami on Saturday. Messi has signed for the club until the end of the 2025 MLS season, following his move from Paris Saint-Germain. The deal is worth a total of $150 million, with the Argentine set for an annual salary of up to $60 million. The seven-time World Player of the Year is expected to officially start training on Tuesday, and his debut could come as early as Friday's Leagues Cup game against Mexican side Cruz Azul. Co-owned by the former England footballer David Beckham, Inter Miami is hoping the added star quality will improve the club's fortunes as they currently sit at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Downpours that lashed southern regions are tapering off, but heavy rain warnings remain in place in most southern provinces, and rain front will get more powerful tomorrow, dropping heavier showers on Korea. And until tomorrow, southern regions need to brace for 250 millimeters of massive rainfall. We're talking about 60 to 100 millimeters an hour of extreme downpours in southern parts of the country. A flood watch is in place across Korea, with crisis alerts for landslides at their highest. Meanwhile, the capital area could see 10 to 60 millimeters mostly tomorrow. Meanwhile, afternoon highs are 3 to 5 degrees higher this afternoon. Jeju remains under a heat wave advisory with an expected high of 31 degrees. Now, rain clouds will move further south on Wednesday, dropping showers on southern regions. Then Jeju will see rain through the end of the week before making its return to the whole country by the weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And we'd like to end today's newscast with a message about the, quote, extreme rain that swept the nation. The term has been officially used for the first time this year. It is when more than 50 millimeters fall in 1 hour and a combined 90 millimeters in 3 hours. So basically at least twice as strong as the usual heavy rain. The National Weather Agency, that is, first coined the term to prevent the massive damage from such extreme rain seen last year, so that whenever extreme rain occurs, the agency independently sends emergency texts. And many more of those texts are seemingly on the way, so do stay alert. That's all for today. Thanks so much for watching.